I'm Amy Sullivan, 32, and I built my first business from a windowless studio apartment after leaving my small hometown with nothing but 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. For years, I was the one my family leaned on: rides, groceries, free labor, always showing up, even when they didn't. But the night before I left for good, they raised a toast mocking me, saying I'd come crawling back. That was the moment I decided I never would. Have you ever been dismissed or pushed aside by the very people you thought would always have your back? If you have, share your story in the comments. I'm listening. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to walk away from people who didn't value you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about claiming your power and drawing the line. What happened next caught more than a few people off guard. I grew up in a town with one traffic light, 2 churches, and too many people who thought staying put was a virtue. You couldn't walk into the diner without someone commenting on your haircut, your shoes, or what they heard about your cousin last Sunday. People married young, stayed close to home, and passed down houses, jobs, grudges. My family lived on the edge of town, near the old paper mill. Dad ran a small mechanic shop out of our garage, mostly fixing up trucks for farmers and construction guys. Mom worked part-time at the elementary school, sometimes subbing, sometimes running after-school programs. We weren't poor exactly, but we were never far from it. I remember nights when dinner was just toast and eggs, and Christmas meant socks and a second-hand book wrapped in the comics section. Still, I thought we were close, the kind of family that showed up. I was the oldest of 5 kids, so there was always something to do. I changed diapers, made school lunches, helped my younger brothers with homework, and sat through more dance recitals and t-ball games than I can count. When my uncle broke his arm, I drove him to the doctor 3 towns over. When my cousin needed a reference for a job at the bank, I wrote it. I was the one who remembered birthdays and packed extra snacks for road trips. I didn't think twice about any of it. That's just what you did for family. By high school, I was also helping Dad with his accounting. He was terrible at paperwork, kept receipts in a shoebox, and wrote client notes on old napkins. I set up a spreadsheet, sorted invoices, made sure we weren't losing money. He said he appreciated it. But when my cousin Caleb came by, barely able to change his own oil, Dad handed him the keys to the shop like it was his birthright. "He's a man," he said. "He needs to learn responsibility." I didn't argue, I just kept doing the work. I also had a part-time job at the grocery store. I stocked shelves after school, bagged groceries for old ladies who gave me candy and told me I was going places. When I got my first paycheck, I handed it to my mom. She blinked like she didn't expect it, then smiled and said, "We'll use it for heating this month." I told her I didn't need anything. That was true. I was used to making do. But something shifted that year. Maybe I noticed it because I was too tired to ignore it. Caleb showed up late to work every day and still got called the future of the business. Lee, my younger cousin, got pregnant at 17, and the family threw her a baby shower so big it made the local paper. I showed them my acceptance letter to a state university, full scholarship, and they barely looked up from their plates. "You're really leaving?" my aunt asked, just like that. I nodded. She shook her head and said, "Dreamers always come back." No one said congratulations. I started to realize that my place in the family wasn't what I thought it was. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't even really seen. I was useful. The one who remembered to bring extra chairs, who stayed late to clean up after Thanksgiving, who made sure everyone else looked good and felt supported. But when it came time for someone to show up for me, the silence was deafening. Still, I kept trying. That summer, I drove my siblings to their practices, helped my mom organize the church fundraiser, and cleaned out the attic with Dad because he kept saying we'd get around to it. I worked extra shifts at the grocery store, saved every penny. I didn't tell anyone I was planning to leave right after graduation. I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to. Not outright, but in that passive way where people guilt you into staying until your dream starts to feel like a betrayal. The only person who really understood was my best friend Marlene. She wasn't from town. She moved in during our sophomore year when her mom took a job at the hospital. Marlene was sharp, sarcastic, and restless in the same way I was. We'd sit on the hood of her car and talk about cities we'd never been to, apartments we'd decorate ourselves, jobs that didn't involve punching a clock in someone else's building. "You're gonna get out," she said once. "You've got fire under you. They don't see it, but I do." I remember that night well. We were at the edge of the lake, watching the moon on the water. I wanted to believe her. But I also knew that leaving meant losing something, maybe not support, since I never really had it, but the illusion that I did. The idea that I belonged somewhere, that there was a home I could return to. When I finally told my parents I was moving out in August, my dad said, "Don't expect us to fund your little adventure." I told him I wasn't asking. My mom asked who would watch the kids after school. I said they'd figure it out. She didn't respond. Graduation came and went. No one brought flowers. My siblings clapped, but only because the principal told them to. At the party my friend's mom hosted, we took photos in a fake photo booth and talked about the future like it was real. At the family cookout the next day, my uncle handed me a beer and said, "You'll be back in a year. They always come back." The others laughed. I didn't. I'd already bought my ticket. One way. A budget airline with 2 layovers and a carry-on limit that forced me to leave half my life behind. I packed everything I could into one suitcase and a backpack. Marlene drove me to the bus stop. She hugged me twice, then said, "Call me when you land, and don't let them pull you back." I watched my town disappear through the back window, the gas station, the feed store, the water tower with our school mascot painted on it. It all looked so small, but I didn't feel triumphant, just tired, like I'd finally stopped trying to convince people I was worth believing in. No one called that day, not my parents, not my siblings, not the cousins I used to babysit, and as the hours passed, I realized something. They weren't losing me, I was losing them, or maybe I'd already lost them years ago and it just took leaving to see it. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just started planning. Because if I was going to come back someday, it wouldn't be with my tail between my legs. It would be on my own terms. College wasn't easy. I lived in a dorm with peeling paint, paper-thin walls, and a roommate who kept the lights on until 3 in the morning. I worked mornings at a bakery and evenings as a campus tour guide, squeezing lectures and study time in between. I wasn't the smartest in the room, but I was always early, always prepared. I didn't have the cushion to fail. In the beginning, I still called home every Sunday. I'd ask how my siblings were doing, if Dad's back was any better, if Mom was still working the aftercare program. Sometimes my mom answered. Most times she didn't. When she did, the conversations were short. Updates, reminders about someone's birthday, and then, "Well, gotta go, your brother needs the computer." I'd ask if she got the care package I sent, snacks for the kids, a note tucked inside. She'd say thanks, then move on like I'd sent a utility bill. I kept up with everyone on Facebook. I saw the birthday parties I wasn't invited to, Lee's baby shower, Caleb's engagement dinner. My name never came up, not even a "we miss you" comment. Still, I sent congratulations. I liked their photos. I wrote under my sister's prom picture, "You look beautiful, wish I could have seen it in person." No one replied. It wasn't anger I felt, not yet, just distance, like they were slowly pulling the plug on whatever connection we had. Not dramatically, no big blowout, just silence where there used to be something. That summer, I came home for 2 weeks. I'd saved enough for a round-trip bus ticket, plus a little extra for gifts. I brought toys for the kids, a scarf for my mom, a travel coffee mug for Dad. When I walked through the door, no one looked surprised. No one said they missed me. My room had been turned into storage. Piles of boxes lined the walls. My old desk was gone. I slept on the couch that week. No one offered to help me move the boxes so I could at least have a bed. One night at dinner, Dad asked if I'd finally decided to switch majors. I told him I hadn't. He sighed and said, "There's still time to be practical." I didn't respond. The next morning, I overheard my aunt in the kitchen talking to my mom. She said, "Lee's the only one who stayed grounded. That girl has her priorities straight. A husband, a house, a future." I stood in the hallway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. They never saw me. That week, I offered to help at the shop. Caleb was working full-time there by then, mostly doing inventory and chatting with clients. I asked Dad if he needed an extra hand. He said, "Caleb's got it." I asked if he wanted help updating the books. He said, "We're doing fine." I watched Caleb mislabel parts and undercharge customers. Dad never corrected him. I told myself maybe they were just busy. Maybe people drift. I'd been gone. I shouldn't expect everything to stay the same. But the feeling sat with me, heavy and quiet, like knowing something you don't want to admit out loud. After dinner one night, I offered to wash dishes. My sister was on her phone at the table, scrolling through photos from Lee's housewarming party. I said, I didn't know she bought a place. She shrugged, they didn't want to make a big deal. I recognized the house. It used to belong to my grandparents. They sold it a few years back, and apparently Lee had bought it through a family connection. There were strings pulled, favors exchanged, none of which included me. I asked if anyone still remembered Grandpa's old shed in the back. That's where he used to carve wooden toys and paint signs for local events. My sister said, Lee turned it into a wine bar. That stuck with me. It wasn't just that I'd been left out. It was that everything meaningful to me, my childhood, my memories, the things I thought were ours, were now background to someone else's Instagram post. When I left town again, no one offered to drive me to the bus station. Marlene came, like she always did. She brought coffee, a granola bar, and a book she thought I'd like. They don't get it, she said, watching me stare out the window. They never did. I nodded, I didn't cry. But I stopped calling home after that. Not entirely, just less often. A birthday text instead of a call, a generic congrats under someone's baby photo. I started living more in my own world. Junior year, I got an internship at a small marketing agency. It didn't pay much, but the owner took a liking to me. He let me sit in on client calls, draft social media calendars, even pitch ideas in meetings. I was the only intern from a state school. Everyone else had family connections or Ivy League resumes, but I held my own. Quietly. Consistently. I told my mom about it during one of our rare phone calls. She said, that's nice. Lee's starting her own business too. I asked what kind. She said baking, just out of her kitchen for now, but it's very entrepreneurial. I waited, she didn't say anything else. That December, I came home again. Shorter trip this time, just a long weekend. I'd bought gifts again, even though I wasn't sure why. I gave Lee a cookbook, hoping it would be taken as encouragement. She smiled and said, thanks, I already have this one. At church that Sunday, I overheard someone ask my mom how I was doing. She said, she's still doing that thing with computers. I think it's marketing. Then she changed the subject to Lee's Christmas cookie orders. That night, Dad mentioned that Caleb might take over the shop soon, said it like it was obvious. I asked if they'd ever thought about expanding, maybe getting an online presence, listing their services through an app. Dad waved me off. Don't need all that nonsense, we're doing just fine. I didn't push. I left the next morning before sunrise. No one was awake. Marlene called me when I got back to campus. She asked how the trip went. I said, quiet. She said, that bad. I didn't answer. I just unpacked my bag, threw the unopened gifts in a drawer, and got back to work. That spring, I launched a freelance side hustle. I made websites for small businesses, helped manage ad campaigns, set up email lists. It wasn't glamorous, but it made money. I didn't tell my family. I figured they wouldn't ask. They didn't. Over time, I stopped expecting anything. I still sent cards, still sent gifts, still kept one foot in just in case they noticed. They didn't. By senior year, I'd saved enough to move to a real city. Rent was high, but I'd lined up a contract gig and 3 long-term clients. I booked my one-way flight in April. I graduated in May. No one from my family came. There was a voicemail from my mom that said, hope it went well. Things have been busy here. No card, no flowers, no call. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, but the silence had changed. It wasn't just distance now, it was erasure. And I'd finally stopped pretending it was. I'd planned the trip carefully, sold my car 2 months before, transferred the title at the DMV myself, used the money to pay off the last of my student loans and book a one-way flight out of state. The job offer was solid, junior account manager at a growing tech firm. Nothing glamorous, but enough to get by, with room to grow. I'd already found a small studio apartment near the office. It had no dishwasher, no view, and probably no insulation, but it was mine. I came back home for one last week before the move. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought I should. It felt like the right thing to do, a clean break. I'd imagined a simple goodbye dinner. Something casual, pizza maybe, or Dad's spaghetti. Nothing dramatic, just a moment to acknowledge the shift. Instead, it felt like they were waiting for me to admit I'd failed before I'd even started. The first night back, I walked into the kitchen and found Lee sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, blinked once, and said, "Oh, you're here." My mom was stirring a pot of soup. She didn't turn around, just said, "I hope you're not expecting a party." I was. I slept in my brother's old room, now crammed with boxes of Christmas decorations and unused gym equipment. The bed sagged. The air smelled like dust and pine sol. I didn't unpack. The week dragged. I offered to help cook, clean, fix the Wi-Fi. Everyone seemed fine letting me float around like an unpaid assistant. No one asked about the job. No one asked what I was excited about. When I brought it up, they nodded like I'd mentioned the weather. Lee stopped by again midweek. She was picking up something for her kid. While she waited, she looked me over and asked if I'd started packing. "Mostly," I said, "just finishing up the last few things." She smirked. "You really think that city job's gonna work out?" I nodded. "I do." She shook her head and said, "You always were kind of soft." Then she picked up her box and left. The night before I flew out, my mom said we'd do dinner at the house. Just us. I offered to cook, but she waved me off and said she'd already planned it. When I came downstairs, there were 15 people in the kitchen, uncles, aunts, cousins, neighbors. Apparently, it had turned into a send-off, though no one told me. The food was basic: store-brand chips, rotisserie chicken, a tray of lukewarm pasta. Someone brought soda. I poured myself a glass and sat in the corner. My dad stood at the grill, pretending to be too busy to talk. My brothers huddled in the living room, playing video games and ignoring everyone. No one asked how I felt. No one mentioned my new apartment, or the company, or the fact that I'd booked this flight with money I'd scraped together without help from anyone in that room. An hour in, my uncle raised a red plastic cup and called for attention. "To our little runaway," he said, grinning. "Off to chase dreams and drink lattes or whatever they do out there." People laughed. He added, "Dreamers like you always come crawling back." Someone whistled. Someone else clapped. I don't remember who. I just remember looking around the room and realizing not one person looked uncomfortable. Not one person stopped him. My mom laughed quietly. My dad didn't say a word. I didn't respond. I set my drink down and walked out to the back porch. The sky was dark, full of clouds but no stars. I sat on the steps and stared at the yard. The grass hadn't been cut in weeks. The swing set was rusting. I could still hear the voices inside: music, laughter, plates clinking. Marlene texted. She asked how it was going. I didn't answer. I waited out there until most of the guests left. Then I went upstairs and started folding clothes. I kept it quiet. No zippers, no drawers slamming, just slow, methodical packing. The way you move when you know no one's coming to help. Around midnight, I zipped up the second suitcase and set it by the door. My backpack was already packed: laptop, chargers, a book, a snack for the flight. I triple-checked my boarding pass, then sat on the edge of the bed for a while, staring at the wall. I thought maybe someone would come in, ask if I needed a ride, say good luck, tell me they were proud. No one did. At 5:30 the next morning, I rolled both suitcases down the stairs. Quietly, I didn't want to wake the whole house. Not that it mattered. I could hear my mom in the kitchen, talking on the phone. She didn't pause when I walked by, just turned her back. I waited by the door for another minute, just in case. Nothing. I stepped outside. The air was cold, heavy with dew. The bus stop was a mile and a half away. I walked it, dragging the suitcases over cracked sidewalks and wet grass. A few cars passed. No one slowed down. When I got to the station, I sat on the bench and watched the sun rise behind the post office. I texted Marlene, told her I was on my way. She sent back 3 hearts and a picture of a coffee mug with the words, "You've got this." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just let it settle. They hadn't forgotten. They just didn't care. Not enough to show up. Not enough to stop the punchline from landing. And in that moment, I stopped waiting for them to see me. They had made it clear. I was already gone in their eyes, just an idea they didn't understand. A version of me that didn't fit their world. So I stopped trying to fit. And I boarded that bus like it, was the first step toward becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. The city was loud, fast, and indifferent. I got off the plane with 2 suitcases, $147 in my bank account, and a job that started the next morning. It wasn't glamorous, customer service at a company that sold ergonomic desk chairs, but it paid hourly and didn't require a degree. I was grateful for that. My apartment was technically legal, though it didn't feel like it. A basement unit with no windows and a radiator that hissed all night. The bed was a foam pad on a metal frame, and the kitchen was a mini fridge and a hot plate. I shared a bathroom with 3 other tenants down the hall. Every time I walked in, I expected something to be broken. But it was mine. No one walked in without knocking. No one made comments when I stayed up late working. No one asked me to pick up groceries or babysit or lend them money. I didn't realize how heavy that had been until it was gone. The first few weeks, I called home out of habit. Sunday evenings, like always, no one picked up. Not my mom, not my dad, not any of my siblings. I left voicemails the first few times, short ones, just letting them know I got in safely, that I started work, that I hoped the kids were okay. No one called back. I told myself they were busy. A month later, I sent a package. A few small toys for my nieces and nephews, and a scarf I thought my mom would like. I never heard if they got it. I checked the tracking, it was delivered. 2 weeks after that, I saw a photo on Facebook. The whole family gathered at Lee's house. A long table, cake, balloons. The caption said, "All of us together again." My name wasn't tagged. My face wasn't missing because I was late. I simply didn't exist in that version of the story. I stopped calling after that, not out of spite, just clarity. There was nothing on the other end of the line. Instead, I focused on surviving. I worked during the day and picked up freelance gigs at night, editing blogs, writing product descriptions, running email lists. Anything that paid. I ate a lot of rice and canned vegetables. Sometimes I'd skip meals so I could afford a subway pass to an interview. I didn't go out. I didn't buy new clothes. I rotated between 3 blouses for meetings and hoped no one noticed. There were nights I came home so tired I sat on the floor because I didn't have the energy to stand in the shower. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just waited for the next day. Eventually, the freelance work picked up. A small business client referred me to her sister, who referred me to her dentist, who needed help with his online forms. I started to get better at managing it, contracts, invoices, timelines. I stopped thinking of myself as someone just trying to make it and started seeing myself as someone running a business. By the end of the first year, I'd saved enough to move out of the basement. My next place had 1 window, real appliances, and a door that locked properly. I painted the walls myself, hung up a shelf, bought a second-hand coffee table from a guy who lived 2 blocks over. It was scratched and uneven, but it made the place feel permanent. Marlene visited that spring. She brought snacks from back home and a pair of earrings she thought would match my interview blouse. We sat on the floor of my living room eating chips out of the bag and talking about everything and nothing. At one point, she looked around and said, "You built all this alone." I nodded. "And they don't even know, do they?" I shook my head. She didn't say anything after that, just handed me another chip. For a while, I kept tabs on my family from a distance, mostly through social media. Lee's baking business had a Facebook page. My dad's shop still didn't have a website, but Caleb posted blurry photos of engines with captions like "workin' hard." My siblings were getting older. I saw prom photos, graduation announcements, a wedding I wasn't invited to. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at a picture too long, wondering if they noticed I wasn't there. If anyone ever asked why. Eventually, I unfollowed most of them. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. By my second year in the city, I was fully self-employed. I'd built up a roster of clients, enough to hire 1 part-time contractor to help with admin. I opened a business bank account. I registered an LLC. I bought a desk that didn't wobble when I typed. It wasn't flashy. No office, no team photos, no LinkedIn humblebrags, just quiet, consistent progress. I still didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding it, but because I'd finally accepted they weren't asking. On my 25th birthday, I got a text from Marlene that said, "You made it, they were wrong." That was it, but it meant more than anything I'd ever gotten from home. I treated myself to takeout. Thai noodles, extra spicy. I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and started outlining an idea for a new service package I wanted to offer. The kind of work I used to think was reserved for people with connections and MBAs. I didn't think about the town, or the porch, or that red plastic cup. Not often, anyway. But some nights, when the city quieted down and I could hear my neighbor's dog barking through the walls, I'd remember walking to that bus stop with 2 suitcases and no one to say goodbye. And I'd think, this could have been different. Not because I needed them to believe in me, but because I believed in them for so long. That was the hardest part to let go of. Still, I did. And once I stopped waiting for them to care, I made room for something else. Not revenge, not even anger. Just momentum. Forward always. The business started small. Me, a refurbished laptop, and a list of cold emails I wrote at night after finishing client work. I offered virtual support, calendar management, inbox triage, digital filing for entrepreneurs and consultants who didn't want to hire full-time staff. Most ignored me. A few didn't. That was enough. By the time I turned 25, I had 4 regular clients and 2 part-time contractors. I didn't take vacations. I reinvested everything. Learned how to write contracts, how to onboard clients, how to fire someone politely. It was unglamorous work, figuring out which tool worked best for time tracking, calming down a panicked founder at 2 a.m. because his password manager locked him out. But it was mine. I worked from a second-floor walk-up above a bakery. Every morning smelled like burnt sugar and sourdough. I'd sit at my desk, windows open, and think about how far away the town felt. Not just in miles, but in relevance. They still didn't call. I didn't either. At 27, I hired my first full-time employee. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and 10 years younger than me. I trained her slowly, watched her thrive. She reminded me a little of myself, only with more support. I paid for a parking space so she could have somewhere nice to work. Bought her a laptop when hers broke. When she cried after landing her first independent client, I told her she'd be fine, that she was more capable than she knew. That year, I cleared 6 figures for the first time. Quietly, I celebrated with a solo dinner and a walk through the park. I didn't tell anyone back home. I still got the occasional Facebook message from old classmates. "Hey, what are you up to these days?" I'd reply with something vague, freelance stuff, digital work. They'd say, "Cool, cool," like they were being polite. One asked if I was still living out there somewhere. I didn't correct her. At 28, the business turned a corner. A few viral tweets, some lucky referrals, and a client who ended up featured in Forbes. Suddenly, I had a wait list. I raised my prices. People paid without blinking. It didn't change who I was, but it changed how I moved. I upgraded my apartment, bought a real bed, took a weekend trip for no reason. I walked into stores without calculating the cost of every item before touching it. When I hit 30, I started getting acquisition offers. At first I said no, then I realized I was ready. I sold the company to a firm that wanted to scale it. They kept most of my team and paid me enough to make me pause when I saw the wire transfer. I sat in my kitchen that afternoon, staring at the screen. 7 years earlier, I'd eaten canned soup for dinner and borrowed a winter coat from Marlene. Now I had a number in my bank account that felt like breathing room for the first time in my life. I didn't call home. Not when I made my first $1,000. Not when I made my first $1,000,000. They hadn't asked. And I'd stopped offering pieces of myself to people who treated them like loose change. Still, I kept an eye on them, not constantly, just occasionally. A glance at Lee's baking page, a scroll through Dad's business listing. It hadn't changed in years, same blurry photo, same 1-star review from 2018. Caleb had apparently taken over the shop. He posted once a month, mostly vague status updates or photos of tires. Then one afternoon, I was scrolling mindlessly when I saw it. A Facebook post, big graphic letters, family reunion this July, old high school field, potluck plus games. The photo was of a picnic table, American flags, a sun-faded bounce house. Caption, "Can't wait to see all of us together again." Dozens of likes, a few people tagged, Lee had posted it. I read it twice, then again. It wasn't the reunion that got me, it was the word all. As if nothing had happened, as if no one had left, as if I didn't exist. I sent one email, just to confirm. Subject line, RSVP. I wrote, saw the reunion post, would love to come, let me know if there's anything I should bring. No response. Not that day, not that week, not ever. I checked the read receipt, she de-opened it. That was all I needed. No confrontation, no dramatic message, no guilt trip or angry voicemail. Just a decision. I booked the jet quietly. It wasn't mine, technically, but I knew someone. A client owed me a favor and I cashed it in. It felt excessive at first, but then I thought about all the years I'd shown up small, all the times I'd softened myself to be digestible, all the hours I'd spent building something they never asked about. No more shrinking. They wanted to pretend I wasn't part of the story. So I'd rewrite it. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not Marlene, not my assistant, not the pilot. Just a destination, just a plan. No announcement, no warning. I'd show up, not to make a scene. Just to remind them I existed, I'd always existed. And I wasn't coming back the way they expected. I didn't sleep much the night before the reunion. Not because I was nervous, more like the feeling you get before a long-planned trip. Bags packed, phone on the charger, ticket already in the inbox. At 4:30, I left my apartment, rolled my carry-on through a lobby that still smelled faintly of last night's takeout, and met the car waiting at the curb. The driver asked if I was heading to the main airport. A smaller one, I said, private side. He glanced at me in the mirror, probably recalculating my tip, then pulled into traffic without another word. The jet sat on a quiet tarmac, engines idling, lights washing the asphalt in pale gold. It wasn't flashy, 8 seats, leather a little worn, but the cabin felt like another planet compared with the puddle jumpers I used to take on budget fares. The pilot introduced herself, confirmed our 40-minute flight plan, and asked if I'd like coffee. I said yes, black, then buckled in and watched the city recede. Sun just cresting, skyline softened by haze, beautiful and very far from where I was headed. I spent the flight reviewing a thin folder. Contracts for a new consultancy I was launching, notes on a potential angel investment, a one-page schedule for the day that simply read, land, walk, observe, nothing about confrontation, nothing about speeches. We began descent over fields I knew by shape alone, patchwork squares, a silver ribbon of river, 2 water towers that once felt like the edge of the world. The pilot radioed local traffic control, then dipped low over the high school football field, the makeshift strip the town used for crop dusting planes and the occasional airshow novelty. She circled once, part protocol, part permission, then set us down so smoothly the wheels whispered against the grass. Through the window, I saw pickup trucks parked haphazardly along the fence line, lawn chairs, coolers, children chasing one another between goalposts. And in the center, a vinyl banner strung between 2 poles, "Welcome home, family." A bounce house sagged beside it, half-inflated, its generator sputtering. Long folding tables created a rough U shape, already laden with crockpots and plastic pitchers of lemonade. The familiar choreography of small-town gatherings. The door opened. Morning air carried freshly mown hay, diesel, and the sugary smell of grocery store sheet cake. I stepped onto the metal stairs in low heels, black coat over a simple dress, nothing ostentatious except that I'd arrived on wings instead of wheels. Conversations stuttered. A hush spread the way rain moves across a pond, rippling outward, catching eyes, widening mouths. Phones appeared. I heard shutters click, the buzz of someone switching to video. Lee stood near the tables in a pastel sundress, holding a styrofoam cup that tipped as her hand dropped. Punch splashed her shoe. My uncle Red Ball Cap, same man who toasted our little runaway, froze halfway through slicing a ham. The knife hovered, stuck midair. Mom was there too. Floral blouse, hair pinned up like always. She pressed fingertips to her lips, not in greeting, more as if testing whether the moment was real. Dad looked older than I remembered, stooped, grease under his nails, but his eyes did the same quick inventory they always had: cost, risk, utility. He didn't find what he expected. I reached the grass, adjusted my coat. "I heard the invite got lost," I said, voice steady, loud enough for the first 3 rows of onlookers but polite, almost casual. Not sarcasm, just fact recorded in the air. No one answered. A local reporter, I recognized her from high school yearbook days, held up her phone and murmured at the camera, "Private jet just landed at Reunion Field, looks like quite an entrance." I kept walking. She trailed me a few steps, then thought better of it. Halfway to the tables, the bounce house generator coughed and died, the inflatable castle collapsing in a slow, tragic heap. A little boy yelped as the roof folded around him. Before anyone moved, I crouched, grabbed a corner, and lifted it enough for him to crawl out. His mother hurried over, breathless thanks tumbling. I smiled, dusted grass from my knee, and continued to the catering line. A catering company, not family potluck, I noted, had set out wire racks of food, fuel cans flickering underneath. The lead server glanced at me, recognition flickering. We'd spoken by email earlier in the week. "Ms. Sullivan?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Balance is settled. Extra linens are in the van if you need them." "Perfect, thank you." I took a plate, spooned a modest portion of salad, then poured water into a paper cup. Conversations restarted in cautious murmurs. Somewhere a speaker crackled with country music, then fell silent. When I turned, Lee stood 3 feet away. Makeup flawless, but her eyes darted like a cornered deer. "You," she began, then swallowed. "You funded this." I shrugged. Someone had to make sure the vendors got paid on time. She flushed. We were going to, but Caleb's check. "Must have been an oversight," I offered. Neutral, no judgment. She opened her mouth again, closed it, and stepped aside. Mom approached next, hands clasped together. Up close, I saw new lines at her temples, brittle edges smoothed by polite hostessing. "Your father wasn't told about all this," she said, glancing at the plane now parked like a silent sculpture beyond the fence. "I know," I replied. A heartbeat. She searched my face for agitation, apology, something. I gave her a small, courteous smile, the kind I use when ending a conference call. "Well," she said, voice thinning, "it's good you could come." "Good of you to have me," I replied. Dad lingered at the edge, arms folded. Finally, he strode over, stopping just outside conversational range, like one wrong word might detonate us both. "Quite a show," he said. "No show," I answered, "just transportation." I gestured at the tables. "This is the show." He shifted his weight, could have let us know. "You didn't let me know," I reminded him. "No heat, only symmetry." His jaw tightened. He glanced at Caleb, standing near the grill, phone in hand, confusion etched across his face like grease pencil, then back at me. "Business good." "Very." He grunted something between displeasure and reluctant respect. The reunion schedule proceeded, 3-legged races, potato sack sprints, a cornhole tournament. I wandered, greeted distant relatives who weren't sure whether to be impressed or embarrassed. Children asked if I was famous. I said no, just a cousin. Under a shade tent, I spotted the bakery owner who'd given me my first city job. She was here catering desserts, small world. She waved, then mouthed, "Proud of you." I felt something loosen behind my ribs. Near noon, the pastor who'd been asked to bless the meal tapped a microphone. Feedback squealed. He spoke about gratitude and togetherness. People bowed heads. I kept mine up, scanning faces, familiar, aging, uncertain. When the prayer ended, I heard murmurs spread. She chartered it, sold her company, lives in the city, million-something. Numbers grew each time they moved from mouth to mouth. Lee tried once more. "We could have used your help planning," she said, a tremor in her smile. "You didn't ask," I reminded her gently. Then I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, paid invoices for the caterer, bounce house rental, portable restrooms, even the banner. The memo line on each check, from all of us. I watched her open it, read, then glance up, mouth forming a word she didn't speak. Gratitude? Shame? Hard to say. I spent the rest of the afternoon like any guest, refilling drinks, tying balloons that came loose, applauding sack race champions. But I noticed things. Dad stepping aside when vendors thanked me. Mom correcting someone who called me runaway by saying, actually, she owns her own firm. Small cracks in the narrative they'd built. By 4:30, clouds gathered, wind picking up. People began packing coolers. I thanked the catering team, tipped them extra, and walked back toward the plane. Children waved, asked if it was mine. I said it was borrowed, that maybe one day they'd borrow bigger things than they ever imagined. At the fence, I turned. My family stood clustered, uncertain whether to follow. I raised a hand, not goodbye, acknowledgement. Then I boarded. The engines rumbled, prop wash bending grass. As we lifted, I saw the banner one last time, "Welcome home." It fluttered, tangled, one corner starting to tear free. From altitude, the field shrank into a green square. The town looked unchanged, 2 churches, 1 traffic light. But on the ground, something had shifted. Not loud, not public. Just a recalibration. The runaway had returned, not crawling, not begging, simply walking the perimeter of her own story. And I knew the consequences had only started. Phones would buzz tonight. Conversations behind closed doors. Questions about what success really looked like, who decided who belonged. I didn't need to supervise that reckoning. It would take care of itself. Above the clouds, the sunlight was clean and bright. I opened my laptop, pulled up a document titled Next Venture, and began typing. I still smelled diesel and sheet cake, but it faded with each mile of sky. Whatever turbulence waited below, I had altitude now, and enough fuel to keep climbing. The day after the reunion, I checked into a small and just outside town. It was quiet, clean, nothing fancy, just a place to sleep that didn't carry ghosts. I could have flown out the same evening, but I didn't. I wanted to see how the dust settled. I kept my phone on silent, but I saw the notifications stack up. Missed calls, new texts, unread DMs from numbers I hadn't saved in years. Some were polite, others hesitant. A few were clumsy attempts at warmth, like people trying on clothes they hadn't worn in a decade. I didn't respond right away. That morning, I walked through the town square. Nothing had changed. Same coffee shop with the crooked open sign. Same grocery store marquee announcing 2 for 1 peaches. Same sidewalk cracks I used to jump over as a kid. No one stopped me. A few people stared, did a double take maybe from the reunion photos, but no one said anything. I ordered a coffee and sat outside with it. Watched a mother wrangle 3 kids into a minivan. Watched a retired couple walk past with their dog, commenting on the weather. I wasn't looking for a moment, just a pause. Around noon, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. I answered. Her voice was calm, almost careful. "I saw you didn't leave yet." I said I needed a day. She hesitated, then asked, "Can we talk?" I told her yes, but only if she was willing to listen, really listen. Not explain, not deflect, just listen. She said she'd try. We met at the diner, the same one we used to visit after church when I was a kid. She picked the booth by the window without asking. I slid in across from her. The waitress greeted her by name, then looked at me with a flicker of recognition and asked, "Back for the reunion?" I nodded. She poured 2 coffees and walked off. For the first few minutes, we talked around things. Weather, the turnout at the reunion, how Uncle Jim brought deviled eggs even though everyone knew he always overdid the paprika. Then finally, my mother looked at me and said, "That was a big entrance you made." I didn't respond. She added, "People are still talking about it." I stirred my coffee, then set the spoon down. "You never called," I said. "Not once, not after I left, not after graduation, not when I opened my business." She blinked, swallowed, then looked down at her hands. "I know." "I kept reaching out," I said. "Even after the things people said, even after you laughed at the reunion toast, even after you watched me walk away with no goodbye." Her eyes welled, but I kept my voice steady. "I needed someone to show up, you didn't." She nodded slowly. "I don't know what to say." I waited. She added, "It wasn't personal. We didn't understand the life you were choosing. It felt like you were rejecting all of us, and it was easier to ignore that than to admit we didn't know how to support you." I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "I didn't reject anyone, I just needed something else." She reached across the table, not to touch me, just to place her hand between us. A gesture, not a demand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize what it cost." I nodded. That was all I needed. Not a fix, not a perfect answer, just a crack in the wall. Later that afternoon, 2 of my cousins reached out. One was Lee, her message short, a link to a photo from the reunion, no caption. I didn't reply. The other was Mia. She and I were close as kids, born the same year, inseparable during summers. Her text just said, "Still in town." I said yes. She suggested coffee. We met at the park, sat on a bench near the old bandstand. She didn't ask about the plane, didn't ask how much I made or what my apartment looked like now. She asked how I'd really been. I told her the truth, not all of it, just enough. She told me she'd always admired how I left, that she used to look at the postcards I sent and imagine what it was like to start over. She never said anything, she explained, because people talked like I was foolish for leaving, and she didn't want to be lumped in. "I should have stood up for you," she said. I shrugged. We were kids. "But I'm not now," she added, "and I'm sorry." That night we had dinner, just the two of us. No family, no agenda. We talked like adults, about rent prices and grocery stores and what it's like to feel out of place even in your own story. We didn't cry, we didn't make promises, but when the check came, she said, "I'll cover this. It's the least I can do." I let her. The next morning, I went for a walk around the high school. The field was empty again. The banner gone, just tire tracks and footprints in the grass. I stood near the goalpost where I used to sit and read during lunch, where Lee once called me a snob for not joining the cheer squad. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and let the quiet settle. The town hadn't changed, but I had. The version of me they ignored, she built something solid, without their applause, without their input. And now they were the ones uncertain, the ones questioning what they missed. I didn't hold grudges, but I didn't offer open doors to everyone either. Some people apologized, some didn't. I made peace with that. I left town the next day. No jet this time, just a regular flight, middle seat, no fanfare. I liked it that way, quiet, clean. Back in the city, I opened my laptop to an inbox full of updates, contracts moving forward, invitations to panels, a request for a podcast interview. I clicked through them slowly, one by one. Then I closed the lid and made tea. I wasn't rushing anymore, not proving anything, not chasing acknowledgement. Just building, still, always. But now, fully on my terms. It's been a year since the reunion. The jet didn't define anything. Not really. It was just punctuation, a visible, undeniable mark at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for years. What came after mattered more. I live in the city now, not in a studio or a walk-up, not in someone's borrowed guest room. A real apartment, top floor, tall windows, the kind where you can hear sirens at night and still feel like you're somewhere solid. There's a fig tree by the window that leans toward the light like it wants to leave, too. I run a different kind of business now. After selling the agency, I took 6 months to rest. I didn't know how exhausted I was until I stopped moving. For a while, I thought about quitting everything, moving somewhere warm, disappearing into quiet, but that didn't last. Instead, I started consulting, not the kind you see in glossy brochures, the kind where I sit across from a 20-something founder in a worn-out hoodie, and they say, "I have this idea, but no one thinks it'll work." And I nod, because I remember what it's like to hear that every day from people who share your last name. I also mentor now, not for money, just because I should. I meet with young women who come from towns like mine, women who feel stuck, women who love their families but don't want their lives, women who carry dreams like secrets, ashamed to say them out loud. I tell them, you don't need permission. That's what they wait for, most of them. Permission to try, permission to leave. But the truth is, you leave without it, you build without it. And if you're lucky, one day you realize you never needed it to begin with. Sometimes they ask about my family. I tell them the truth. Things are civil. I answer calls when they come. I don't expect much. I don't offer much. When I visit, which isn't often, I stay at the inn, not the house. I meet people for coffee, not dinner. I keep the conversations short, the expectations lower. Lee reached out once, a long message about clearing the air and starting over. I read it, then archived it. I don't carry anger anymore, but I don't hand out trust like flyers either. My mother calls more often now. She doesn't ask for anything, mostly updates. The kind of things she used to hear from other people, now she hears from me directly. We don't talk about the past. I don't need her to rewrite it. I just need her to respect where I've landed. And she does, or tries to. The funny thing is, some people still think I'm the one who changed. That the distance is mine. That I became cold or proud or too successful to remember where I came from. But I remember everything. I remember the bus stop, the suitcases, the silent dinner, the weight of being told I'd come crawling back. I just didn't. I walked out with nothing. No inheritance, no backup plan, no co-signed loan or warm send-off. And I came back with everything I needed: peace, power, and the ability to choose who gets close. That's the real success no one talks about, the ability to choose. Not who loves you, not who roots for you, but who earns a seat at your table after you've built it from scratch. Some people earn their way back. Mia and I talk every few months now. She sends photos of her kids. She asks about my work like it matters. And when she tells me she's proud, I believe her. Others never tried. They let the silence stand, and I don't chase them. Once, after a mentorship session, one of the women said, "You're so calm. How did you forgive them?" I told her I didn't, not exactly. I just stopped giving them the power to interrupt my peace. There's a difference. Forgiveness implies they were right to hurt me, or that I'm supposed to forget they did. I don't forget. I just don't carry it anymore. I land back in that town about twice a year now. Sometimes for work, an old building being repurposed into a tech hub asked me to consult. Sometimes for a visit, brief and on my terms. I never sneak in. I never call ahead. I fly. Every time I step onto that field, I remember the laughter, the red plastic cup, the silence when I walked out the door, the walk to the bus stop at dawn. And then I remember the banner, the gasps, the way they all stared as I stepped down in heels and said, "I heard the invite got lost." That wasn't revenge. That was reclamation. A reminder that no matter how small they made me feel, I outgrew the box they tried to keep me in. When people ask how I got here, I don't say luck. I don't say hustle, I say clarity. Clarity about what I deserved, about who I was without their approval, about what kind of life I could build if I stopped waiting for applause. I know now that success isn't just a number in your bank account. It's the moment you realize you're no longer performing for an audience that never clapped for you. That reunion was the first time I let them see me without apology. This life I live now, it's not perfect. I still get tired. I still make mistakes. But it's mine, fully, unapologetically. And if there's any legacy I leave behind, I hope it's this. You can leave. You can survive the silence. You can build a life so rooted, no one can shake it, not even the people who swore you fail. You don't need their permission to land. You never did. If you've ever been told you'd never make it, only to prove them wrong, this story was for you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have shown up, stayed quiet? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever returned stronger to a place that once tried to hold you back? And what did that moment feel like? If this hit close to home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a reminder that you don't need permission to succeed. See you in the next story.